Hello, this is Andrew Colsky with Stop My OCD, and I am excited today. We have Rebecca Braverman, who is a PhD student working with OCD issues and has some information for us about anxiety as well. So, Rebecca, welcome, and could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Rebecca Braverman. I am currently a PhD student at Hofstra University on Long Island in New York. I did my undergrad at Smith College, where I got my undergrad degree in psychology. I currently study OCD and other disorders that fall on that spectrum, and I also do clinical work in trauma and phobias.
Oh, wow, wonderful. Well, you are a perfect person for the target audience that watches these videos because there's so many questions out there and people seeking information. Um, just to give us a little bit about your background, how did you end up deciding to go into this particular field in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was an undergrad, I wasn't sure what I wanted to get into, and I by chance took this class that my professor was giving, and it was all about OCD. And I thought it was so interesting, and it busted so many things that I knew about OCD. I thought OCD was about washing your hands. I had no clue just the extent of what OCD was, how many flavors of OCD there are. Um, so so I went to him and I said, I would really love to get involved in research. How do I do that? Do you need somebody to work in the lab? What do you need? And he said, I don't really need anybody to do like grunt work in the lab right now, but you are welcome to sit in on the TA meetings. Do you want to do that? And I was like, absolutely. Thank you so much. And he said, what are you doing over the summer? And I said, nothing currently. Probably looking for a job. And he said, why don't you come do research with me? Well, you can come do clinical work. I'll supervise you. And I applied for a fellowship, and I got a fellowship. And the rest is history. I started going to the IOCDF conferences, and I was presenting, and I got into work um, as a research assistant, and then I made it to Hofstra, and I didn't know anything about Hofstra at all. I you know I'm a New Jersey native, but I never really heard about Hofstra, and it turns out that Hofstra is huge in clinical psychology. So that's sort of how I got into it.
Wow, wow, well, that's wonderful. Wow. So there's so much when you start looking into OCD and related disorders, and you have an opportunity to sort of dive in a little deeper. It can become really interesting to figure out what's going on and how these things work. So can you share with us some of the research that you've been involved with, and help us understand what are researchers looking at today related to OCD and similar disorders?
Yeah. So some of the things that I had worked on with other people and in conjunction with the IOCDF, I recently wrote a paper about OCD and dementia, which is something that not a lot of people have been interested in, because people think about dementia and then they just sort of compartmentalize it because it's such a painful disorder to think about and to witness. And I should know. I had two grandfathers who have suffered through it, and I wrote this paper with Dr. Ida Gorbis, who was one of the people that I worked for, and we published this paper. You can find it in the IOCDF newsletter. Um, I also worked on a couple of poster presentations for the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. which was about measuring disgust reactions in people with OCD and hoarding disorder. And if you don't know, hoarding disorder is also considered along the spectrum of obsessive compulsive disorders. Um, and I've also written a literature review, also with Dr. Ida Gorbis, and that was about body dysmorphic disorder in regards to aesthetic surgeries, meaning plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery, and bariatric surgery. So we're looking at all of those things, trying to inform clinicians and expanding the research.
Wow, wow, those are some pretty heavy subjects. You mind if I dive into them a little bit?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I'm really curious. The first one you were talking about with OCD and dementia, that sounds like it would be really difficult to try to work with. So what particular things did you study, and did you come to any conclusions?
So this was a literature review.
Mhm.
So I did not interact with any patients. I did not interact with a lot of other things, and in fact, I'm not actually cited in the paper. I was an assistant in writing the piece based on a presentation that my boss did,
Mhm.
and it was very interesting because for frontal temporal dementia, which is a common form of dementia, sometimes people see obsessive compulsive symptoms later on. And it takes a very skilled clinician and a very skilled neurologist to be able to figure out what is OCD and what is dementia. You
Wow.
know, as is the case with a lot of disorders, diagnosticians need to know what came first. Um, Maybe there was some obsessive compulsive symptoms early on in life and dementia brought it back. Um, so what you need to do is you need to really make sure that you are assessing properly. And again, I'm a doctoral student, so I can't really give any medical advice or any therapeutic advice. But what I can say is that it is really, really important to have a good clinician and a good diagnostician to be able to figure out the difference between OCD and dementia.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's really interesting because I've been doing a lot of podcasts with different people, and one of the areas of subject matter that seems to come up a lot is sexual orientation OCD. And the reason I bring that up is because it's the same issue of diagnosing. How do you know when you're a clinician and you're trying to diagnose somebody whether they are doubting their sexual orientation from an OCD perspective with obsessive doubt, or maybe they're questioning their actual orientation, which is not OCD, that's something else. But they can all look very similar. And that's one of the areas that seems to be super complex as well when you're talking about trying to differentiate, in your case, is it dementia, is it OCD? And so there's a lot of things, you know, reasons that people would want to seek out clinicians or doctors who are specifically trained in OCD, because these can be really intricate types of decisions that have to be made, and they have to know what questions to ask and what to look for and how to differentiate the answers. So, yeah, I never thought about the dementia link before, so that's interesting, that you looked into.
Yeah, yeah,
So let me,
absolutely.
well, go ahead.
One of the things that I can say is that OCD is now being considered a neurodivergent disorder. That a lot of it is linked to just the way that our brains are built. Um, and there is in research there is some debate as to whether this is true. For example, the role of trauma in OCD. Most researchers consider it a precipitant, meaning without that the OCD being triggered, it's not necessarily a trigger, but without the trauma, the OCD may not come to light. But your brain is already built that way to have OCD. It just needs a push, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. When I talk to people about, just my personal experience of what I see in practice, and this is not based upon any research studies or anything from my side. This is just what I see. And I tell people that I kind of break down the OCD cases into two types. The first is people who will tell me that as a kid, they always had OCD and it's always been with them throughout their life. And the second one is the person who didn't experience OCD, but then they had some kind of a traumatic event, and then OCD reared its ugly head. Now, my
Mm-hmm.
my my thinking, again based on no research, my thinking is that, just as you said, they are pre-set for OCD, and then something kind of turns on that switch. um,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be really interested, down the road, if someone does research about that. But again, so I don't want to say that that is the case. It's just my thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that research would be really valuable, especially for anybody who maybe previously had an anxiety disorder, because anxiety and OCD are very much intertwined. Um, and uh, and discussing traumatic events, and seeing how that affects people with OCD and how that they inform each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other piece that you were talking about that you've been able to do some research with, the body dysmorphic disorder piece of it. um that's such an important thing, because I think there's a lot of people who maybe have never heard of body dysmorphic disorder, so they don't even know what it is. And then, you have people who maybe do have BDD and they don't know it, and then they go out and they seek plastic surgery, some sort of reconstructive surgery, because they're perceiving something is wrong with a part of their body. So, based on that was a literature review that you did, correct, on the BDD? What
Yes.
what what did you learn through that review?
So a lot of the things that I learned through that review is that, for first of all, not everybody with BDD will seek out an aesthetic surgeon.
Mhm.
Um, Mostly because of money issues. Although we found this in hoarding disorder also, so I wonder if this applies also to BDD. That even if people don't have the means to do something specific, they may try to get it anyway. So, for example, people with hoarding disorder, uh, they don't have space in their home anymore for all the things that they have, so they may rent out a space outside of their home, and they can't afford it. But all of their money, all they take loans, all of these things, and they go towards this thing. So I wonder if the same is true for BDD, that even if you don't maybe have the immediate monetary needs or monetary means to go get surgery, you may try to seek it out anyway.
Mhm.
Um, which we found, for people with BDD who go and get surgeries, they often find that they're never satisfied. And anesthetic surgeons have said this also, that they've had patients who are not ever satisfied with the work. And these may be world class surgeons, who have had really great results in reconstruction, in bariatric surgery, in any kind of plastics. And then somebody comes in and says, you did a terrible job, you didn't fix anything, which is really a problem with somebody's perception, that they perceive that their body is wrong, or they feel that their body is wrong, which is not to invalidate those feelings, but to say that the way that they perceive their bodies is very different from the way somebody else might perceive their body. So one of and aesthetic surgeons have no official way of screening patients with BDD. Um, they don't have a questionnaire or anything like that, and dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, is rising among people, especially in regards to Zoom,
Mhm.
where people are constantly staring at their own faces. And I look in the mirror and I say, my nose is a little pointy, or, do I have a double chin? Things like that. You're constantly looking at your own face.
Right.
And there's this other phenomena which I didn't know about called Snapchat dysphoria, which
Oh.
is, the use of filters on a person's face. And they say, I like this so much. This is how I want to look permanently. And you don't see it obviously with like the dog faces or the vomiting rainbows, but but filters that very specifically, narrow somebody's cheeks, because I got very big cheeks, or fix their eye shape, or their face, or other areas may include the chest for both men and women, genital size, genital size, or the way it looks, which can also, it opens a whole other can of worms about gender discussions, which I won't get into. Um, but these are things that I found out through this literature review. And again, I didn't know much about body dysmorphic disorder. I thought it was OCD focused on the body, but it really is, again, so much more than that.
Yes, yes. Well, that's that's really interesting because you know from my side as a mental health counselor, I do treat people who have body dysmorphic disorder. It is a very challenging disorder to treat, but at least there's training, there's specifics related to BDD treatment. What I did not know, nor have any reason to know at the time, is what actual surgeons may do or may not do in terms of screening patients. And I just always assumed that they would have some sort of a screening procedure that they would go through before they did any sort of surgery for someone, but I never really knew. So this is very enlightening to hear that there's no specific screening procedure developed yet.
Yeah, and I co-wrote this years ago, maybe back in 2021, I think is when it was published. So it's 2023. Maybe somebody was inspired by that article, and started developing something, because I mean, if they did, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so who knows? Who knows? Maybe by this point, somebody has figured it out. Research moves very quickly.
Yeah.
The research world moves very quickly. Books that are considered, the Bible for OCD may have some outdated techniques at this point. OCD has been studied for a very long time, so it can change. It can change pretty fast.
Right.
So hopefully there is somebody somewhere is developing a measure. And if they are, I would love to see it.
Yeah. No, you're so right about the speed of things these days. And even over the relatively short period of time that I've been creating videos and podcasts and things, I've seen things change from, one of the original videos I did to, now there's been some changes and things. So it is really interesting to watch that happen, but it's also good because it means that people are devoting time and research to looking into these things and creating progress. So that's a positive side of this. And that's sort of look, one of the not one of sort of the primary goal for me doing these videos is to put information out there that is educating people about the subject, that's hoping to break down the barrier and the stigma for OCD and help people realize, like you said, it's not just washing your hands or arranging your books. It's much, much more than that. And so, it's just the more that people know, the more that they can understand what might be going on for them.
Yeah.
So, that brings me to something that I think the audience would be interested to know as well, which is alluded to the fact that anxiety is an issue for you as a person with lived experience. Can you tell us about your experience with anxiety? Like, when did you first realize that you had any sort of anxiety going on, and give us a picture of how it affects your life?
Sure. So, as a kid, I had a lot of nightmares about many different things. And it was very distressing. I would have dreams about something happening to my family members. I would have dreams about something happening to me. I would have dreams about just the most bizarre things. I think I had a nightmare once where I was running through a candy forest and I was being chased down by a Yeti. And it was the strangest thing, but I felt my life was in danger. And because this Yeti was going to like hurt me. And one of the one of the other really bizarre things that happened to me as a kid is I developed a fear of Cookie Monster from Sesame Street.
Wow.
Very bizarre. In my 4-year-old mind, watching Cookie Monster on TV, I said to myself, he not only eats cookies, but he also eats plates and salt shakers and all these things. Who's to say he's not going to eat me? That's terrifying. And one time we went to Sesame Place, and I'm sure as everybody, has heard about Sesame Place is not the same thing as Sesame Street. And they're not beholden by the same things that Sesame Street is. So there have been issues with the mascots talking to kid, like doing things to kids. There was the Rosita one, Rosa, the Spanish speaking monster, I think, and she bypassed two black kids to go talk to two white kids, and that was very controversial at the time. Rightfully so, controversial. Just saying. But what happened was we went to Sesame Place, and there was a Cookie Monster mascot. And I was very scared, but he came up to me and he tried to give me a hug, and I booked it, you know?
Oh,
And I'm 4 years old. And I'm a very good runner. My mom said I was running at 6 months. So I was gone. And Cookie Monster was very insistent that he was going to get a hug. I, so the day ended with me hiding under a mailbox
oh my gosh.
and my mother saying, "It's okay, he's gone, come on." And from that point on, I was very afraid of Cookie Monster. I would put my hands over my eyes whenever he was on the TV because we watched Sesame Street every morning. My parents were big into Sesame Street, and I'm no longer afraid of Cookie Monster. Maybe because I've been exposed to him so much, right? Exposure and response prevention. Um, but this was like maybe the earliest indication, maybe to my parents, that I had some kind of there was something going on.
Hmm.
Um, and it was very strange. But to them, I was still a very happy child.
Right.
Um, and then about seventh grade, due to a lot of other factors, I was being bullied and all these other things. I started to develop depression, and I didn't quite know that it was depression at the time, but like I dreaded going to school. I had very bad thoughts about myself, about whether it would just be better for everybody if I wasn't there. All of these sort of things that come along with depression.
Hmm.
So it's been a long journey, but almost because of all the things that I've had to go through with my own mental health, I've wanted to help other people through research, through practice. You know, they say that lived experience is one of the most powerful weapons that a therapist can have in their arsenal. And you can see this in the OCD field. Lots of OCD therapists have OCD.
Hmm.
And that was something that also drew me to OCD, that there was among these therapists, everybody freely talked about their lived experiences, whether it was with OCD or depression or PTSD, like all of these things. People were very open. And I loved that. I loved that. And I wanted to be part of it so bad. So,
Yeah.
sort of, that's also what brought me into the field, and that's sort of my abbreviated story with anxiety.
I I love the Cookie Monster one, and I have to ask just for clarification: did he ever get the hug or no?
No,
No. Okay.
no, Cookie Monster never got the hug. I did though when I was much older. I got a Cookie Monster onesie that I
Ah.
would, and I think I wore it to Edinburgh Comic Con with my sister. And my sister was dressed up as Oscar the Grouch, and
Oh.
very silly, very silly. But it was kind of big for me that I was like, I'm not afraid of Cookie Monster anymore.
Right.
Um, it's funny because kids come up with things that logically in their mind is so frightening. That's a logical conclusion for a child, that they say Cookie Monster not only eats cookies
Hmm.
but eats inanimate objects and plates and salt shakers, and who's to say that he's not going to bite me or he's not going to eat me? That's a logical conclusion for a child.
Yeah. Wow.
Maybe
I I
it's not logical,
mean,
maybe it's
no. I mean, it makes total sense. It's just it's an interesting story because of the subject matter. Cookie Monster's this fuzzy, interesting character. So
Oh, absolutely. No, I to this day I love Cookie Monster, and I have a kinship with Cookie Monster. I also want to be fuzzy and eat so many cookies.
I hear you. So
Happily.
so you know as you talk about your experience with anxiety and just sort of sharing how this all evolved for you from your personal lived experience, so not as a PhD student, not as a professional in the area, but from your personal experience, what would you say were the most effective things that were useful for you when you're dealing with anxiety to help address your feelings?
So I think having a really good support system is really important. And my parents have been really wonderful in that. I have a really good relationship with my parents. I lived at home over the summer and while I was waiting to go back to school, and my parents have just been really wonderful about my anxiety and the things that I've gone through. And my mom used to say to me, here's a way to figure out if you should be panicking or not. If you are the only one who's feeling these things and you look around and nobody else is panicking, then it's probably going to be okay. And which is a very sweet thing to say, and obviously we can't know what's going on in other people's heads. But that was actually very comforting to me, that even if I'm, got if I've got, the physical sensations, like my chest feels really tight and it hurts, if I look around and I see other people enjoying their lives and just sort of being there, then I can take a minute and just take a deep breath, and just stop for a minute. I also have a dog, my emotional support dog, even though my parents refer to me as her emotional support human. Um,
Goes both ways.
it goes both ways, absolutely. Um, I love having my dog here. She's really wonderful. She gets me out of bed in the morning. If it wasn't for, having a dog staring at me saying, "When are you going to take me for a walk? When are you going to take me for a walk? It's been 9 hours." You know, I have to take her for a walk. I have to get up. I may
Right,
still be in my pajamas, but you know what? The goal was to get me out of bed,
right.
and that goal has been achieved. So, having an emotional support animal has been amazing. Having a really good support group. You said not to mention the PhD, but like I have a really great cohort, and my cohort has been really wonderful. Whenever I have felt anxious, they have been like, oh, I felt the same thing, or oh, do you want to talk about it? Do you need a hug? All these things. I have a really wonderful partner. My partner also, sometimes gets anxious, and we just, we get along. So having a really great support system is so important. Um, that would be probably my main advice, would just be having a really good support system, and that could include, a clinician. It could include a pet, um, an online community, anything that really gives you support, I think, is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, no, it's sort of that ability to interact personally with others, whether they be human or four-legged and furry, but
Mm.
having that ability to reach out. And I agree with you that if you have friends that are there and you can go out with and talk with, that's great. If you happen to be in a situation where you don't have that luxury, there are support groups. There are, and it doesn't even have to be a support group for anxiety. There's groups of people who do activities that might be something that you enjoy. So if you like hiking or photography or cooking or whatever it is, there's groups out there, that you can join and just have that social interaction, which is so helpful, in many of these cases. And, I think sometimes people are so caught up in the feelings of anxiety and things that they are not really focusing on all of these other options that are available to them. So they don't think about it, which means they don't look into it, which means they don't use it. But, you know,
Yeah.
becoming aware of it is an important piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to make a quick plug for the IOCDF, which has a ton of resources for anybody who's struggling with OCD. If you feel like you're struggling with OCD, please reach out to people at the IOCDF. They have incredible therapists, and they have an enormous amount of resources. So if you feel like you're struggling, you can reach out to them, and you can find some really incredible therapists, and you can find community there.
Hmm.
I really love the community. There's a lot of different special interest groups, which is great. So there's like a professional networking meeting. There's an LGBT special interest group. There's OCD and autism, which is also up and coming in the field of research. You can look at Tourette's and tics. All of all of those things. They have so many special interest groups, and if you don't see a special interest group, start it.
Yeah. No, it's, and just for clarification, so IOCDF is the International OCD Foundation. Their website is iocdf.org. And it's, I've been a member for years now, and I go to their annual conferences and other things. And one of the interesting things about them that's a little bit different from some other organizations is that they're so inclusive of not just practitioners, but people who are living with OCD, family members, the whole spectrum. They cover everything from research of new topics to support of current situations. They have support groups. My support group is listed there as one of the support groups that's available for people. Um, so, like you said, so many resources, and everybody from any part of the situation has a place there. Um, so, thank you for mentioning that. And the other one that you had mentioned was ADAA, the Anxiety and Depression Association of
Mhm.
America. Their website is adaa.org. They also have a lot of resources and things for people with anxiety, depression, OCD, anything along those lines.
Mhm.
So it's really great that there are organizations like that out there, and that they're accessible to everybody, not just the professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. The IOCDF is so inclusive and it's so
Mhm.
wonderful. And they recently had a really wonderful conference where one of the speakers was Monica Williams, and she did this incredible talk about OCD and racism,
Mhm.
um, and not just about people who have intrusive thoughts about accidentally being racist, which is definitely a thing, and those people are probably not racist. I mean, everybody has some degree of racism, but that's opening a whole other can of worms. What Monica Williams went through was she talked about discrimination against people of color who are going through OCD, and how they're not like as likely to get treatment as white people. And if you're interested in that, go check out Monica Williams. She's amazing. She's at the University of Ottawa. She's awesome. But again, the IOCDF is really wonderful. Um, I love everything that they do. Definitely go check them out.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's their last conference was just a few months ago in San Francisco. I think you told me you were there. I was there. I didn't know you at the time.
Run into each other.
Yeah,
We have to
yeah,
we have to meet up next time in person.
yeah. Well, I will be at the next one. So I mean, that's my goal. So
I'll
I've
come
met
too.
a lot of really interesting people there, um, to share information because you know just like we've been talking, you think of OCD as like a specialty, but then when you get into OCD, there's so many subspecialties in there. And you got one person who maybe is great with OCD and kids, someone else who might be great with OCD, harm OCD specifically, let's say, or whatever it is. And so you meet these people at the conference and you can um, connect with them and contact and share information back and forth. Hey, I've got this client with this unique issue. What do you think? Um, so it's really for professionals, it's a great organization from that standpoint. And then I've met other people who are moms who have kids with OCD, and I had one on. We did a podcast, and she had written some books, Julie Derrick, and she's a big advocate for helping spread the word. So it's just so many resources, and everybody is there to help everybody. Nobody's there to you know it's not like they're trying to make money off of you. They're there because they want to support the cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll find that with a lot of researchers too, that there are a lot of researchers that just genuinely want to help. If you are struggling with these things, you can talk to somebody, and there's a good chance that those researchers also have OCD or um, some other kind of mental disorder, and they just want to decrease the stigma.
Right, right. Well, you and I were talking before about some books that you think are really helpful for others, and I'd love if you wouldn't mind sharing with us what are those books, how can they be helpful to different people, and let's put the information out there.
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely. So the first book that I would love to recommend is Freedom from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, which is by Jonathan Grayson. He is really excellent. He is a big believer in exposure and response prevention, also known as ERP or EXRP, depending what camp you're in. Um, but this is really great for both people with OCD and for researchers, because you can actually get a good idea of what OCD looks like and how to get involved in doing exposures for yourself, for somebody else. Although I would not recommend just doing your own exposure. I would definitely recommend doing it with a professional. So this is a really great book. Definitely recommend this.
Yeah. That's one
Um,
of the first ones that I read actually when I was getting deeper into OCD treatment.
oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, this is another one that's really good for researchers. John Abramowitz and Ryan Jacoby are really great researchers. And I would definitely recommend going through this if you are a professional and you want to know more about OCD. That's a really great resource. And for patients specifically, oh, I have too much stuff on my desk. For patients specifically, this is a really great book, Everyday Mindfulness for OCD.
Mhm.
And this one is written by John Hirschfield and Shala Nicely. And Shala Nicely also has this really great book called Is Fred in the Refrigerator? And Shala Nicely is also a therapist, and she also has OCD. So her book is about her lived experience with OCD and BDD, and a little bit of trauma sprinkled in. Um, Shala Nicely is incredible. I've met her in person. Wonderful, wonderful person. So this is a book that I would also definitely recommend. This was a book that was actually assigned to me in class. So reading through this was really interesting. Um, but definitely, this is a good one also.
Yeah. We seem to have many of the same books in our libraries.
Yeah.
All of the authors there that you've been mentioning. If you go to an IOCDF conference, for example, you will meet these people there. They come to the conference, they speak. They're on panels. They're very knowledgeable people. They're very involved with the community. They care. Their goal is to help people with this. Um, they're approachable. They're just regular people who are doing a fantastic job in the OCD community. So, um, I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah,
Sorry, I got a little
absolutely.
blip on my computer screen there for a second. But so anyways, yeah, those are wonderful. And if you look up those authors names, you'll find they have a lot of other things out there because they're involved with research studies. They're involved with so many good things.
Yeah, yeah. Other podcasts.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 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 definitely. So yeah, those are great names to look for. um so maybe one day, Rebecca, you will have a book of your own as maybe you'll find a particular thing that you find is, we need a book on this. So,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's something that I would really love to do. One of my passions would be to teach, or to teach a class like my professor did for me, and take on students.
mhm.
Um, Absolutely. That's something that I would really love. And then I'll take all of my little ducklings to conferences with me.
Well, along that line of thought, I do have one more question for you to kind of wrap us up here, and that
Yeah.
is, if some of the podcasts I do are from people who are learning to treat OCD, whether they're interns or residents or students or whatever. as well as practitioners. And so if someone is watching this video and they are considering going into the field, becoming a student, maybe they're interested in research, maybe they're interested in clinical work. Um, do you have any particular thoughts or advice for someone who's thinking about that?
Do your research, not just research in the field, but research into programs. Um, there are a bunch of really amazing programs out there. And in fact, the IOCDF also has a list of colleges and people to study OCD with. John Abramowitz is on that list, um, and he's wonderful. Um, I would be sure to look into financial resources. Um, Sometimes there are some scholarships that are available, but I would also look for a program that is funded, a program that has stipends for students. I currently don't have a job. My parents give me money. Um, but uh, but this semester I'm a TA and I get a stipend for that. I'm teaching 2 classes and I get a stipend for about $2,000, which is amazing, but it's a lot of work. On top of my own classwork and working with clients and doing research, like all of these, this is very heavy. And one of the other things that I would say also is um, this is not for everybody, which is not to say that you're not qualified to do this. There are a lot of people who are qualified to do this, but this is not the only way to get involved in the field. You can do a PhD or a PsyD. You can do either one of those, or you could get an MSW. You can get an LCSW. You can get an LMFT. You can get so many different degrees. You can probably practice with a master's degree.
Mhm.
Um, as I'm sure you probably know, a PhD or a PsyD is not the only way to get involved in this kind of work, and it's not the only way to get involved in research either. Um, Talk to people, look people up, do networking. Um, Networking can be stressful, but it's absolutely worth it. I got to where I am because I networked to the right person. Um, so so I guess that would be my advice. So look for solid programs that will give you funding, or any other kind of added benefits. You don't have to get a PhD or a PsyD in order to get involved in the field. And network, talk to people. There are plenty of people who are really interested in taking people on. Even if you have no idea what's going on, you can you can say, I have no idea what's going on. I would love to get involved somehow. What do I do? And you're going to find some really great people who will help.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I appreciate you sharing that. It is, I agree with you. It's not for everybody, but for those people who do find an interest in it, it can be very fulfilling. There's some things that we do in life that we accomplish, but they're not fulfilling. And this
Hmm.
is one of those things that can really be fulfilling in addition to accomplishing things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, Rebecca, I want to thank you again for taking your time to share all this great information with us. There's so many interesting things that you're doing, and I'm sure so much more to come. Um, we probably will be hearing a lot more about you over the years as you continue to progress in this field of study. Definitely be looking for you at the next IOCDF conference. Um, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's my first professional interview. Woo!
Hey, you did great. You did great.
Thank you.